We're starting in just over a minute. Another case study about electronic immunization registries. This one will be with Aaron Bieringer from the Minnesota Immunization Information Connection. So fascinating story about interoperability of electronic immunization registries. So probably a concern as an EIR matures, but might be good to think about it from the start. He'll be explaining that and telling us a story about his involvement and his work in this area on this critical question of electronic immunization registries. See you in 30 seconds. Welcome to this third case study about electronic immunization registries. So this is ahead of the PAHO, Pan American Health Organization course on the topic of electronic immunization registries from planning to implementation. With us today is Aaron Bieringer. Hello and welcome, Aaron. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
So you work at the MIC in Minnesota in the United States. This is the Minnesota Immunization Information Connection, and you are the interoperability lead and implementation coordinator. Could you tell us what that actually means and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah, so basically my job consists mostly of staying on top of immunization messaging formats and transport options to make sure that in Minnesota we are aware of and using the latest and greatest in electronic connectivity between our immunization information system and external partners. So whether that's EHRs or pharmacies or anyone else that's interested in sending or receiving data from us, schools, making sure that we can do that in a standard automated electronic fashion.
All right. And what, in order to do this job, what is it? Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Are you more of an IT person, a public health specialist? How did you come to EIRs, and what did you have to learn to contribute to the work you're doing now?
Yeah, so I do have a formal IT degree. That's kind of my background. I don't think you have to come from that angle, but that has definitely helped me. When I started with the Department of Health on the MIC team, it was a lot of just data entry and trying to make things work. We had spreadsheets of information coming in, and we were transforming them into something the system could convert. And so I went to my boss and I said, this is kind of crazy. There's got to be a better way to do this. And she was like, well, here, read all about HL7. And I basically read an entire HL7 implementation guide, which anybody that's tried to do that knows that that's a little crazy. It's like hundreds of pages of really,
Can you clarify
material.
What is HL7?
So HL7, Health Level 7, is the name of the organization, and it's the format of file that immunization data really flows in, at least for us in the United States immunization community. So I kind of dug in and read this whole really dry, really long document and became sort of the HL7 expert for our program at least, and then kind of worked my way up from there. So having a good technical background helped me understand like logically how systems work, but I think anyone who's got the time and energy to read and understand the wealth of materials that exist online, you could be successful in this realm.
All right. So we're interested in a case study about your work, and specifically in a time when you solved a problem or had a breakthrough. Can you tell us what is that breakthrough or problem solving that you'd like to share with us today?
Sure. So, like I mentioned, HL7 is sort of the message format that we use here to send data around. So the immunization world is a little interesting in that the version of HL7 that we use sort of keeps marching forward, and it's very difficult to read and understand and implement one of these versions exactly perfectly with the way that everyone else does. Like, that's the goal of standards, is that everyone can implement one thing the same way, but the standard is very complicated. And so the goal today, or the thing I want to talk to you about today, is we are in the middle of actually implementing the newest version of HL7 again. So kind of an interesting case study on how we did it once, and we did an okay job of it. Like, it works. It definitely is the workhorse of our messaging, but we're trying to do it again properly so that we can really leverage the fact that it's a standard that everyone can build to.
So can you tell me what happened? Why do it again? Why iterate? How did you go about it? Who helped you? And most important, how did it turn out?
Yeah, great. So, I think the first question of why iterate, why do it again? The first time we implemented it was in 2016, right at the end of 2016. And we were very pressed for time. There was sort of a national incentive program that was pushing for everyone to use this format. So we were very much like, we need to get this in place and working so that people can use it. We were a little rushed. We probably didn't quite understand the new version of HL7. The versions are similar as you go, but there is enough difference that you really have to understand it in order to implement it properly. And interestingly enough, kind of everyone across the nation implemented it slightly differently, because the documentation was good, but it wasn't like ironclad perfect. So there's a lot of jurisdictions that are in this sort of same boat of, they have a version, the newest version of HL7, but it's a little bit off standard, and they're trying to figure out, how do we make it work?
So, Aaron, just one question. So what's at stake? What bad things can happen if different parts of the country implement a standard, but in different ways? What's the worst that can happen?
So the very worst that can happen is that two systems that are talking to each other are saying different things in the same way. So you tell me one thing and I understand it a different way, and now I have tracked information on a person incorrectly, and then later on somebody uses that information to assess, somebody's immunization status, or when do they need to get vaccinated next, and it's wrong. We have the wrong type of vaccination, or we have the wrong date of vaccination, and then somebody really gets very improperly served at their doctor's office trying to figure out, do they need a vaccine? What kind of vaccine do they need? So that's very worst case scenario. Much more likely is that it's a lot of extra effort for two systems to understand each other. So normally when everyone implements a standard, it becomes very easy to say, I'm using standard A. Oh, great, I understand that. Here's a message. We talk. Everything's great. When everyone's a little bit off standard, then it becomes this really long iterative discussion about, like, where are you off standard? Let me test a message. I didn't understand what you sent. How do we figure this out? And it's a lot of extra work that shouldn't really exist. So it costs a lot of money to set up and maintain electronic interfaces. And the goal of those is really to save money, to build them once, to sort of forget about them and have them work on their own. And you lose a lot of that.
So can you sort of scope out for us what that project of iterating to I guess, I don't know what you call it. Is it quality improvement? Is it sort of standardization, further standardization? Can you tell us about the scope of that? What's the timeline? What kind, what's involved? How does it turn out?
Sure. So we started middle of last year, and we started by, first of all, there was this really amazing tool built in the last couple of years called the ART tool. It's the aggregate assessment reporting tool. And what it does is it sends like thousands of messages to your system and then sort of grades you and tells you exactly where you're off standard. So the fact that that exists now and it didn't before is really one of the things that's letting us move forward with this, when before that would have been a lot of extra work on our end. And so we participated in getting tested. We got our results back. We said, wow, we are off standard in a couple of places. And so middle of last year, we started saying, okay, let's take this list of issues and let's start to work on them, right? Like which ones are most frequently happening, which ones are most concerning, and let's start to address them. The problem was, as we started to address them in the current interface that we had, people started saying, well, if you make these changes, you're going to break our interfaces. We spent a lot of time and energy sort of breaking the mold to work with you, and now if you just change these, we're again not going to understand what you're saying to us. So the external providers, we gave them heads up. We said, this is coming. We've been hearing from you that we're off standard and you wish we weren't. We're going to try and fix that. So we had them involved, and we had them reviewing our test environment to see, if we make these changes, what happens. And they were they were a little concerned because the changes we were going to make were going to break their interfaces. So we had to sort of take a step back and say, okay, we can't do these stepwise fixes because we're going to basically break all of these interfaces several times. And so now what we're doing is we're standing up a completely new interface. So basically building a new version of HL7, but it's the same version of HL7 we have, just implemented properly. And we're actually right in the middle of doing that. We hope to have it done within the next 4 to 6 weeks. It's going pretty smoothly so far. The effort right now is really, we're building a completely new endpoint. So people sending to this new endpoint, their messages will be treated with the stricter version of HL7. So that will allow people to move over as they're ready. But also, as we take on new groups, we can onboard new groups to the new version, the proper version of HL7. The developer that we have working on it has access to the ART tool, so it's good that he can make the changes he needs, then run another suite of tests and see instantly, did I make it better? Did I make it worse? What do I still have left? So it's this really iterative process, but it's been really great and moving along quite well.
Fascinating. So there seems to be an obvious lesson for countries that are maybe starting out now with establishing and designing and then establishing an electronic immunization registry. So what would you advise to a colleague from another country who is developing or considering the development of an electronic immunization registry?
Yeah, so I think a couple of main points excuse me, would be to really try and make sure that you understand the specifications that you're using in no matter what you're doing. That front end planning can save you so much time and headache if you really understand the requirements for what you're building out, and make sure that you build on standard as much as possible. So we do have some items in the national standard that we just can't meet just according to Minnesota law. So we're always going to be a little bit off standard, but the fewest number of off standard situations you have, the more interoperable your system becomes. And then really use the community that you have around you to try and do this work. So like I mentioned, this ART tool, that's not something Minnesota developed. That's something that came out of a national nonprofit group. And we wouldn't be anywhere near as far along in the process as we are now if we were just trying to do this on our own. A lot of people around the world are trying to do this work. tap into what they're doing and use their resources to help you. You don't have to do this all by yourself. And then probably the most interesting lesson learned is if you're going to change something, make sure that that change is not going to break things for the people you're already working with. So really make sure that you're vetting the changes you want to make with your stakeholders, and give them the lead time they need, or find new and interesting ways to build things that don't break or impact the current work you're doing.
Thank you very much, Aaron Bieringer from the MIC, the Interoperability, the Minnesota Immunization Information Connection, and you are the Interoperability Lead and Implementation Coordinator within the MIC Operations Unit in the state of Minnesota in the United States. Thank you for sharing your experience and lessons learned. All right, we are just a few days ahead of the Electronic Immunization Registries course that is kicking off on Monday. This is a level 1 scholar course developed for the Pan American Health Organization. So for those of you who have now received your letters of acceptance, this will be a case study that you will find within the course that you will be working on and that you can use to inform your own course project development. For those of you who unfortunately were not accepted, and we know there are many of you who were in fact disappointed, we urge you to stay on our Facebook page. We hope to offer more events, speakers specifically on the topic of electronic immunization registries. And we already have a great event that will be offered to everyone who applied for the course, that will be shared in the coming days. Once again, thank you very much, and keep an eye on our Facebook page. We have more great events coming, and look forward. Thank you for joining us day in and day out on our Facebook page. Great.